I don't want to sign up to the celebrate. I can't read that. No.
Right, good morning everybody and welcome to today's Joint Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We are going to start the meeting in 2 seconds. I've got one computer says it's 1 o'clock, one says 12:56, so therefore a little time delay between in Shropshire, apparently between Tolman and Shrewsbury. Right, okay. I need to inform you this meeting has been live streamed and recorded. So please can I ask you to identify your name and role before talking so that it's clear to those watching the meetings who are speaking. Because we do have people watching in remotely. So item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. I believe we've got Jack Sanders. Anybody else?
That's good. Yeah.
Oh no. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any interested there? Oh, that's good, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December 2024 to be confirmed as a correct record. Yes, please.
Oh, my name is David Sandbach, I'm a co-opted member. On the present list, I was actually present at that meeting. And I think Anne Mitchell was also present at that meeting. Anne's over there.
I think I was too.
How do you know?
What do you suggest?
Well, as a correct record, it should have my name and Anne's name, and
Probably mine.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's all I can say is we will double check that fact and amend it accordingly so it is a true record. So we can't really sign these off until we do that. I assure you we will do that. So thank you for raising that, David. Now we come to the good bit. Item 4, Shrewsbury Health and Hospital Trust update. Can I pass it over to yourselves?
Thank you, Chair. Paul Gardner, Interim Chief Nursing Officer at SAP. I'm just going to give you a quick run through of the sequencing must and should do's, but also in relation to medicine, which is what was requested from the last meeting. Firstly, an apology. On slide 3, it is incorrect that's been sent, but I've sent an updated copy to Sophie just now. So as we speak, we have 5 must-dos to do and 17 should-dos to do. And then if you go down to slide 5, that talks about section 31, and we were very pleased to announce that we've reduced the section 31 conditions by a further 3, and the one is related to medicine here. It's the registered provider must devise, review and assess the effectiveness of the system processing for care planning records. Sorry, I'm going a bit fast for you. So that one's also been removed, and obviously we've removed 2 others that were related to paediatrics in the ED. There are 2 remaining. They're both related to children, which is the paediatric triage within 15 minutes and the left without treatment, which we've asked the CQC to look at again with regards to what we can do with removal or at least archive some of those. And so they're working that through at the moment. So I thought I'd just give you a quick update on section 31 conditions. And then if you go to the actual action plan, which is slide 8, that's the one, thank you. So obviously there's still actions completed in the months and there's progress against those. So we're making sure that we've got better compliance with fluid balance charts. We've got substantive posts that have been recruited to in the escalation wards, we're just waiting to start in post. Previous actions completed, as you can see listed there, is around standardised ward processes, oversight of metrics with regards to the deteriorating patient and quality data, recent trolley check compliance with the introduction of My Kit Check app. We've improved HCA vacancies with an introduction of HCA apprentices, and I just thought I'd give you an update that as of the last weekend, we've recruited 28 HCAs and I think 31 registered nurses through the recruitment day last Saturday. But we're still doing ongoing recruitment for the trust. Obviously, we're monitoring VTE via the nursing quality dashboard and working with my medical colleagues to make sure that those are updated. And then you've got next steps, which is about advanced life support and basic life support training with a multi-year trajectory in place. We're still off track with mixed sex breaches, but that's usually due to the areas in the ED. And obviously sometimes that happens within critical care because they're ready for discharge to the wards, but the wards aren't ready to receive them. So after 4 hours, that will be classed as a mixed sex breach. And obviously we're still hoping to promote and highlight the importance of dementia-friendly areas. I've talked about the must-dos and the should-dos. Obviously, if you go to slide 11, which is pressure ulcers, I just wanted to lay some of the fears around some of the acronyms. So we've got the National Wound Care Strategy Programme, so those are a little bit around the wrong way, but they're getting there. And we've got the revised skin booklet. The skin is a pressure relieving bundle that we use, and S-skin stands for surface, and then skin, K for keep moving, and IN for incontinence, which we need to apply to a lot of our patients because they're quite frail and elderly. And then the purpose to risk assessment is a new risk assessment tool that was implemented in 2024, which replaces the old Waterloo score. If we move to number 12, as you can see, I've talked about fluid balance. That keeps sort of balancing between the amber and the red. That does depend on whether we've actually done a total score at the end of the 24-hour period. So we're making sure that we're doing some more work within the wards and departments. We're also making sure that we've got fluid balance champions so that they can look at those in the realm when they go around and talk to people on the floor. We've changed the dementia screening to 6CIT, which is the cognitive impairment tool. And that is why there's been a drop in that. That's getting everybody to get used to that. So that's where we're at with that. I've talked about VTE. Discharge planning, the medical transformation programme successfully launched a ward round. And then we've got a ward discharge dashboard. And then the work stream has been now subdivided into 3 sub-work streams. And they've seen a sustained improvement in all the metrics, now discharging more than 30% of patients before midday and exceeding the target for simple length of stay 14 and 21 day plus patients. And we've had regular MAID events with that. I just wanted to bring out the SHOP model in the next slide, discharge planning, which talks about, next one. Sorry. So the middle one, which is the SHOP model, which we're trying to enforce with all our ward areas, with the medics and the staff, to talk about. SHOP stands for sick, home, other plan, so that we deal with our sickest patients first. We then do the home, as in the discharges, and then we look at the other plans for the other patients. You go to the next slide. I just wanted to bring up about mandatory training around the bariatric bed training. That is in the red because we've got only once a month training, but that's been hard to get everybody on board. We're now trying to put more training in for those staff. and we're improving on basic life support, but it's still got a way to go. If we go to 18, deteriorating patient sepsis. So we're obviously doing some more work on managing our patients who with sepsis and making sure that we look at the set of obs and the next set of obs and making sure that we're looking at our patients with regards to the bundle there, that we need to look at the patients. So there's meeting in place to discuss relevant themes and areas for improvement, and that group meets bi-monthly. So we've still got work to do around sepsis. And then staffing across the medicine wards, which is the next slide. We've reviewed staffing across all medical wards, but we've also reviewed staffing across the whole of the trust with regards to a biannual staffing review, and that went to the board for sign-off last month. But when we're looking at staffing per se on a daily basis and a shift-by-shift basis, there's twice daily meetings to ensure that we've looked at all areas where there's gaps. And we've obviously got the enhanced care support staff as well that support with patients who require that from cognitive issues. And then the 4 p.m. staffing is reviewed and attended by all divisions so that we ensure we're safe for the night, and on a Friday we're safe for the weekend. And as I said, we've talked about apprenticeships and we've had improvements with our recruitment day. And then the next few slides are around the action plans, which I've talked to most of the issues that are in red still on here, but we've got plans in place, and there is a nursing quality metrics dashboard that the divisions meet weekly to go through. And I'll pause there for questions. It's very hot in here. I'm absolutely boiling.
That's the problem with Shirehall. That's why we're evacuating.
So you go to the Guildhall, I've been told.
Yes, it's either very hot or very cold.
Marvellous.
Do you think a fan might help? Because there's one over here.
I'm quite calm. The glass is still here. It's much as soft.
Thank you. I've got everybody running around.
Just stuffing up.
You. That's great. John's looking at what John's thinking I'm fine.
What about my hair?
Well, thank you for being so accommodating.
Well, we did intend to give you the credit, but not this one. So, yeah. It's absolutely wow.
Yes, thank you.
Please continue whenever you're.
I'll pause there for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, can I ask, the actions you've already completed,
Yes.
sorry, thank you. The actions you already completed, how do I know, or how do we know they're adequate? You obviously improved the situation by taking an action, but how do you know that that actually solves any problems?
Let me give you an example then.
Should we be reviewing those actions once again?
Yes. So obviously what the whole idea is, we can't just say an action's complete, we have to evidence it.
Right.
And then following that evidence, we then go back and re-audit to make sure, because you're right, we could say all fluid balance charts are filled in 100% of the time, therefore we've evidenced it, therefore it come off the action tracker, but we have to continue to audit those issues going forward so that we can. So also what I'm intending to do is, where we've got actions here that are green, is I'm trying to introduce night rounds into Shrewsbury and Telford. So I would then take those actions to see in practice, are we actually doing them? So that's another form of audit, but with presence out of hours.
Yeah, not only are you doing it, but are they working as well?
Oh, I haven't started the night round yet.
Okay.
I've only been there a couple of months, but I will be.
Good, thank you. My other question, read sprung in my mind was it's good news you recruited some more registered nurses last weekend. When do they start? When do we see the benefits?
So they should start within about 2 or 3 months, depending on, obviously the detail is, are they coming from another hospital, so they have some notice to give. Then we've got obviously the recruitment process to go through, but I can get that update. But at the moment, they were only recruited last weekend, but they should be in post soon.
Thank you. Do we recruit as many as we wanted to?
We need to keep on recruiting. So we're going to try a new recruitment day, so that's a Saturday. We're going to try in the week, in the day, and we're going to try in the week between 5 and 8, because you'll get people coming from other job places to drop in, and we can sell our wares.
Are you having open days then?
Yes, and last Saturday was an open day, recruitment open day.
Excellent. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to ask any questions with regard to the presentation? Yes, Helen.
I think you just actually answered the embedding thing. So how long, I mean, once something's signed off, you're going to do the night audits and so on, which is fine. How long will you carry on doing that? Because it's quite easy for these things to slip back.
So it won't just be me, so it'll be myself, my deputy and the senior nursing team. So there'll be a rota and a rotational process. So we will make sure that we're seeing that in the realm. If we see something that was green and it isn't being done in practice, then we go back and say, right, what are our measures now to look at it again in a different way. So fluid balance is a timely one, but sometimes we'll get new starters that don't understand the running total or the total at the end, so that you have to start that training period again with those individual members of staff.
So will this go on over a year or continuous?
It has to be, because of new people coming in. Yes, sorry, absolutely continuous.
And so that's really important. I think the recruitment thing is really interesting, and the way you recruit. What is different now to the way you're recruiting that means that you are recruiting more than you have been in the past? Because you must be doing things slightly differently.
Yeah, we are. So it's that is really a good question, because this is the question we raise at CQC often. So we've now gone from inadequate to required improvement. That makes a difference to recruitment and to, attracting people into the trust. So for me, speaking to the CQC, we want to think about not just being at required improvement, we want to move on to good and outstanding. So therefore you will attract more people. And then we've got other opportunities that have arisen in the trust about different areas of working. I'm looking at whether you do a rotational programme once they've finished their qualification. Do they work 6 months in surgery, 6 months medicine, 6 months support services? So we can look at all different ways. But what the team did on Saturday was individual ward managers shared what their wards were like, what it was like to work on there, and how interesting it was. And because they heard it from the individuals that work in that area, they were really enamoured by that.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Did you?
It was just to say, for a whole range of staff in the organisation, what we've tried to do over the last few months is to say, if I come in as whatever role it is, how can I develop through the organisation? What support will I have? And also then in terms of what training and development. So we're starting to see and share those stories. So we've got examples of people that have gone on to then decide that they wanted to either train to be a qualified nurse, but also how we support them internally and share those stories so people can see that through. So it's almost that they can see a career with staff, as opposed to, we don't want people leaving, and we've started to see our leavers numbers drop as well, which is encouraging to see.
So exit interviews will be really interesting now,
yes.
won't they?
Yes.
Can I ask a couple more, or should I?
No, it's fine. I've got 3 people after you, so 4 people.
This is the question I always ask, and they'll expect me to answer it, which is, okay, you've got all these metrics, all these things that you've got to achieve. What are our patients feeling as a difference on the ground? What are they actually seeing? What's the feedback like?
I think I said this last time.
Yeah, you do, but I need to.
Outcomes.
So obviously I speak to patients all the time, going round, and very, very, very good feedback. If the feedback isn't so good, then I'm addressing it there and then. What I want to do with our matrons is ensure that they are also doing their rounds at visiting time. So not only talking to the patients, but also talking to the relatives, which is even more important sometimes.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got patient experience. There's a patient experience group that I chair, which I'm supposed to be chairing Wednesday evening. And you get feedback from there as well. The feedback we get through national surveys. So we're using all of that to make sure that we look not just at the quality and safety, but the experience too.
And we've also agreed, because we want to build confidence with STW, with the residents and the citizens, that what we've agreed is, I've met with Lynn from Health Watch, and what we've said is how we can bring Health Watch in and also share those stories. So it's not just where we get it wrong, but also where we're getting it right as well, to build confidence as well.
And I'm due to meet with Simon.
They could all meet together, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah.
More than happy to do that. But we need to, it's how we share those stories.
Well, it is, but part of what you're doing here is sharing stories, and collecting those stories is collecting the learning.
Yes.
So have you got that learning noted down places so that becomes embedded?
So in some of the wards, not all of them, but in some of the wards we've got, you said we did.
Right.
So we can actually put that on the wards to show that you said we need the water jugs changing. I'm just saying this, don't take me to red on this. The water jugs need changing 3 times a day. And we say, right, well, we'll change the water jugs 3 times a day and put fresh water in. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. Or you said we need comfier chairs while we're waiting. Then we've changed the chairs.
My other concern, looking at all of this, the things in red on here are dementia, mental health, all of those issues,
mental
capacity, and actually understanding when somebody has learning difficulties, because many things flow out of that. So where are you anticipating the cut-off line? Are you actually achieving those things? Because it's highly skilled and it needs lots of training. So how are you progressing that?
So the reason they're red is because we've changed over the cognitive impairment risk assessment. So we need to make sure that everybody's trained in that, everybody knows what they're looking for. We need to look at, more importantly, the environment around dementia friendly. So not having blue flooring, things like that. We need to think, we've got 2 dementia nurses, and we've got the enhanced care team. So they look at patients that are having one-to-one or cohorting, so that we can listen to what they need. And often, I've seen in other trusts, I haven't seen it here, is if a patient's at risk of falls but also has dementia, people sit with them as a one-to-one and go, sit down. And actually what dementia patients need, and I know because my mother's got it, is to walk. So it's just having those skill sets to ensure that we're treating those patients the way we should be. With the Mental Capacity Act assessments, we've got that statutory, we have to do that. That again is the training that's being put on. So we need to make sure we've got more training, and we need to make sure that staff attend. As you can imagine, January, February, well, end of December, January, February, we've pulled people into the clinical areas because we had to. It was really important that we make sure that we've got staffing numbers as they should be. So we need to catch up, and that's now scheduled for spring and summer, that training.
So do you have a timeline for that? Because it's that their clinical needs are really great.
Yeah.
So you must have a timeline where you want to achieve this and get this embedded, and the embedding around the training for mental health, learning difficulties, all of those things, and even if they're statutory, are difficult. Will take some considerable time, but you need to have a target date.
So we have a yearly target for all training.
Yes, but does it fall off the end?
It does actually, because of new starters.
Okay.
So that's what happens. New people come in, and our rate drops again against the target. So we try and make sure they're up to speed, but we also make sure that we've got people on the ward in the shifts that are already trained in that.
I think I'm sure that's the case, and I would hope you would always do that with all new staff coming in.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Living with someone who finds it very difficult to understand his brother's dementia.
Yeah, cool.
It doesn't matter how much people have a a training course and basics. Some people find it very difficult to actually deal with, and so that takes an extra amount of emphasis, training, or whatever, so that we don't have them dehydrating. We don't have. So, how are you approaching that?
That's all linked to the training.
Yeah,
and it's all linked as well to people. You've got to give compassionate care, haven't you? And the basic fundamentals are food and water.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing that, then people shouldn't be in the job.
No.
As far as I'm concerned.
No, but
They are.
Well, if they are and they're in SAF, I need to know them.
right. Okay.
Can I intervene on that one?
Yeah.
What about agency nurses? I mean, that must have an effect because they're not trained to your standard. They're not working all to your systems, are they? So how do you manage agency nurses? Are they more of a problem than they are? No.
No, so agency nurses are, when they're required, are an essential part of the workforce. I never want to make accusations about agency nurses not doing what they're supposed to be doing. However, we have turned the agency tap off in December for some of our areas. Some of our high risk areas we haven't. So even we have agency nurses in the EDs who are regular people who come back to us. We also work really hard with the agencies to make sure that all the people that are coming to us can prove that they're up to date with their mandatory training as well and bring their certificates to prove that. Yes, they have to be trained in our systems, but that's in every hospital. So once they're trained and inducted, then they can work in the ward areas. They're often a vital part of the workforce and the shift, but we have turned the agency tap off in a number of areas.
Why in some areas and not in others?
Some areas are higher risk, so the emergency departments.
Right.
So we've not turned that off because we've still got staffing gaps there. So if we book it, we go out to bank, and that's our own staff that are on the bank or bank solely staff, but they're still ours. And if they don't fill the gaps, we will need to go to agency to make sure it's safe. And I met with several agency nurses in Shrewsbury ED last week who are regulars and are very competent.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anne.
Just wanted to go back to where you say all these changes are evidenced. Are they, all the changes are evidenced? They're evidenced presumably by audit.
Yeah.
Who carries out the audit? Are they? I used to be a ward manager and I've seen people audit and I've gone through them and cross-checked them and they are not accurate.
So we do have individual ward managers doing their own audits, but then we have a peer audit. So another ward manager from another ward comes and rechecks that or does the audit. So we're just making sure we've got those people in. Plus there's the corporate nursing team. So we've got quality matron who go out and audit completely unbiased, not linked to any division, not linked to any ward, so they can actually see it for themselves. And I've seen that in practice.
That they are employed by SAP.
They are.
Is there any scope for going into other areas?
So we've got the ICB that come in and do our insight visits as well. Right. So I don't know whether Lorna you wanted to say something on it.
So this is the first time I've been to Health Opening and Scrutiny. So I'm Lorna Clark and I'm the new Chief Medical Officer for the ICB, having joined in September. And what Paula says is absolutely right. So we will send our teams in, independent clinical teams in to staff to assure those audits and outcomes in a number of different ways. So we will have insight visits where we have clinical quality staff that go in and focus on particular areas. They'll speak to patients, they will speak to staff, they'll speak to families. If they're in the ED, therefore will also speak to ambulance crews and other involved stakeholders. So they will go in and do that. My clinical leads that work within the ICB will also go in and audit some of the outcomes for and the processes for some of the other wards, particularly thinking around elective waiting lists or elective care that's provided. They do go and they've recently been in to look at the people who present into ED as walk-ins to see if there's anything that we can do to ensure that people are ending up in the right place at the right time. So absolutely, it's our job to go in as a critical friend, support the trust by making sure that first of all that we have sight of all the the audit work that they're doing, and there is a lot of it. I think Paula is doing a good job of telling you what's going on, but it undersells it. There's a huge amount there, but also making sure that we have got that independent scrutiny as well.
Oh, Joe, you had your hands up all while ago. You want to say something?
I was able to answer it.
That's
thank
fine.
you. Yeah.
That's good, thank you. Derek.
Thank you. I was actually thinking of it, thinking about recruitment, and then you started talking about mental health. And you know, it took me 8 years, 10 years back, but she was talking about the same things then. Not you, your predecessors were talking exactly about the same problems. How do we deal with them? How do we get extra training? And they were actually talking about getting support from the Mental Health Foundation.
Yeah.
People in there to train there. So it still seems to be, even a decade afterwards, you're still struggling to deal with the same problems. I know it's not your problem. I know you're a new team, but it really needs to be cracked, and it needs to be an ongoing process, not something that seems to rear its head every 9 or 10 months, 9 or 10 years, and then we start looking at it again. Because it's clearly a major problem, and it was a major problem then, and it seems to be resurrecting itself, whether it's because of the increase in mental health problems that we've got in the world at the moment. But it really, just in that part alone, if you don't mind.
If I may, just in terms of the clarity to make sure we've got this right. So we have a extremely good relationship with the Mental Health Trust. Having been a lightweight of 24 years in the NHS,
Yep.
Actually, I am pleasantly surprised in terms of the service we've got. I think the distinction is the training, which training is how we embed that, because we know when people are doing the training and we know when it's going to run out. So we made a conscious effort this year at South to make sure we know when winter's going to fall, we know when we're going to be busy. So we said from November through till March, we would make sure that our frontline staff were exactly where we needed them. So we said, where is the mandatory training that they need to attend, and where's the ones that we know that they can pick up on? And it's an ongoing problem. We've got, so you can look at it from appraisals all the way through, and I think that's the work that you were describing, Paula.
I am, but I'm also needing to differentiate. The training that's in here is the Mental Capacity Act training, which is different to the Mental Health Act. So absolutely, to the mental health element, we have a great relationship with MPFT. I've met with Paul Bowers this week around children and what we can do with children, and we also need to involve the police. So there's a lot of people we're co-opting in to make sure that we can get right people around the table to get the patients in the right place at the right time. And the Mental Capacity Act, whilst that has dropped, is again due to new starters. That's more important around the dementia and recognising delirium and things like that. So we are still that everybody's working on it, but mental capacity and mental health are different. Okay.
Just to go to the recruitment now.
Okay.
It really is good news that you're actually recruiting staff. Had you not just introduced a freeze on many other areas? And the other thing is, you had.
We've introduced a recruitment pause.
Recruitment pause. It's not the same as a freeze. It's just a pause.
Yeah. So we're not pausing or freezing clinical posts, frontline clinical posts. We're not.
But you're freezing everything. Everything else is on pause.
Everything else we review on a weekly basis as to whether they are required at this time.
Yeah, because I was talking to some members of staff, and they actually said, well, they're not recruiting at the present moment, but obviously there isn't.
Yeah.
But the question then comes, there's always been a financial implication on it as well, isn't it?
Mm.
And just how far are you going to be able to push the boundaries?
Yeah, thank you.
So the 25-26 financial plan that we've been advised by NHS England is that we need to look at the headcount that was put in the financial year 1920, not as in 1920. Be careful with that distinction, which does require us to lose a proportion of staff. Now, it won't come as a surprise to the committee that the digital maturity of staff is quite low. But it's very binary, isn't it? We can't just take out hundreds of people at once, the role and the contribution that they make, but also we have to have behind it the digital technology. So, for instance, order comms. So that is when somebody sits in a clinic, orders a diagnostic. That should be electronic. It is in most organisations. It isn't in SAF. So what we want to be able to do through this next financial year is to make sure that we've got the digital technology so we can reform the workforce, as opposed to we can't, I don't want to say cut posts out of it because these are people, but we do need to stop and actually look. We need to remove paper out of the organisation. We've not got self-check-in in our outpatients. There's a whole raft of things that we need to do. And that's why we held a meeting last week with all our teams to start prioritising how we do this, because we can't cut our way out of the way that we have done for the last few years or even longer.
So it's as we said at the last meeting, digitally, you're far behind many other organisations.
I can only view by where I've worked before. And I would have expected, as I say, something like order comms is something that I would have expected to see in an organisation. I spend a lot of time walking around the organisation. I'd expect patients to be able to electronically sign in either with a barcode or a Q code. That they're just some examples in terms of if we think of where AI is going, we need to think about the benefits that can help. But I would assume, given the financial position that we've been in previous years, we've got to stop and make some priorities, which we will do as a board now, in terms of where the areas where we make some improvement. So we've paused the posts and they go through an exec team every single week, because what we don't want to do is keep adding to the problem.
Clearly, the use of digital in AI is going to be a big cost saver in the future, provided it is at an affordable rate. And today is a pretty appropriate time, because there's a huge conference going on at the present moment, isn't there, regarding the AI. But it's not an opportunity for you to actually go forward and say, look, there's a real opportunity of actually invest to save, of actually being able to get more money to actually put the initial investment in. So there's a long-term saving. Because quite frankly, I still think your nurses, especially on the wards, are still going about in the old-fashioned way, that everything is double-checked, everything is written down. Your staff are, quarter of the time, are sitting there filling in damn pieces of paper when they could be doing so much more. And it is just, they feel demoralised. And as I say, people coming into your thing from other places think, God, we really have gone back in time.
Yes, and I would agree with you. I don't think that's in all areas. I think that the trust has made a lot of investment over the last few years in terms of the way but that is why we're pausing the posts, because what we don't want to do is put more headcount in. We have to stop and transform and reform the workforce. So I completely agree with you, and it's the pace in which we now need to be deliberate at delivering those, and that we can share those in the organisation and with our patients. Because actually, a lot of the comms that I send a weekly comms out to the staff, and we've had some fantastic ideas in terms, because nobody knows better to do the job than our staff. And in terms of the ideas, and what we want to do now is to be able for them to see that if they're going to speak up, we can support them with those ideas.
I think what worries me is the amount of money that actually the hospitals take up of the NHS budget. When you consider that you take up a huge swathe of the money, and yet we're trying to move back to community, we're trying to bring people back into health, where they're going to cure, get better quicker. And it just seems that, while you're taking up this money, community is always going to suffer. And we are determined that people will go back and be cured in the community. And we're talking about the hospitals at home and all the rest of that stuff, which seems to be working on the outside. It just that concern. Something has to go in there to break the cycle.
Can we move on, please? Hilary.
I know we're looking at must and should do's, but this is,
Could you speak a bit?
sorry, this is a more general question. Going back really to the CQC report. The one thing that really shocked me years ago was the caring aspect, that it was inadequate. You have now gone to good, but just looking at your staff report, care of patients, service users is my organisation's top priority. I mean, I'm telling you what you already know. You are bottom, in the bottom quartile for that, really at the bottom. And I know that was 2022, and the CQC have put you at good in 2023. I suppose my question is, and I know that all these things that you say you're doing will probably improve staff's view of the organisation, but how do you translate that into caring? And how do you ensure that your staff show that they care for the patients? Because that was obviously an issue a couple of years ago. And how do you know it's better now, really, and that it's improving?
So from a nursing midwifery AHP perspective, as I said at the last meeting, I'm seeing that for myself. And I did say at the last meeting, I have seen really compassionate care being delivered to patients, especially when they're most vulnerable, in the EDs. I think we need to think about the patient experience and moving forward. I think for the CQC to go from inadequate to good showed that it was absolutely demonstrated to inspectors, which is no mean feat. It really isn't. We've got, as we said, as Lorna said, we've got lots of external people still going around and talking to people and making sure that we're listening and observing. You need to observe that compassionate, caring, and that is done when you look at somebody and the way they talk to somebody, particularly, as Heather said, somebody with dementia and somebody that's become quite distressed. It's how you calm that individual down, and you can only do that by looking in and seeing. If we see things that aren't quite as where they should be, then we'll address that there and then. We have ward managers and we have matrons and we have divisional directors of nursing, and they have me and my deputy. So from a nursing, midwifery and AHP, I'm witnessing that on a daily basis. It's hard to measure sometimes.
How have you turned that around?
Oh, well, I personally,
2022, as I say, your staff thought that you didn't care, really. Or, yeah.
We can't answer 2022, right. But what we can answer for is, as I've said, if that was demonstrated to CQC inspectors, then that is really, 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 really good. I'm really impressed with that. Really impressed.
We are trying to create a compassionate organisation across all levels of the organisation. So that's from me throughout the board through to every single person in the organisation. But that will take some time. That means I have to repeat it on a daily basis. I have to walk around the organisation. I have to observe it. I have to see it. I have to challenge it, because we want to make sure that people also feel that it's, you know, psychologically safe in an organisation to see something and to shout up about it. So I've spent a lot of time this last few weeks actually people calling it out. And this is going to take some time, because actually we haven't had the staff survey back. I would say that there's areas where we've improved. There's work that we will clearly have to do.
When is the next staff survey?
It's normally due out in March.
Oh, right. So we've got another one. So we'll be able to see then.
Yeah. But I'm not deluded. That will need to take that will take a lot of hard work and commitment. There will be a plan that goes with it, but those scores need to be higher. People are best people in terms of people wanting to be treated and to work at staff are our staff. So we have to convince 8,000 people to speak about it, and also to be confident in what they say. And we only have to think, when I joined in September, and some of the questions that this committee asked me, the care we weren't proud of at that time. We've talked about in terms of dispatches, which has bruised a lot of staff, but we want to move forward now and let them be proud of the care that they're delivering with the leadership that Paula spoke about and the rest of the team are supporting.
Okay. Will you bring the results of that survey to us?
It will go on I don't know the release date yet, but it will go into the public domain, and we are very happy to to share that along with the action plan that we will work on when it goes to our board.
Great, thank you.
Good, thank you very much indeed. You mentioned dispatches. One of the problems that occurred was highlighted to me in dispatches for staff morale. So we're all talking about patients' experience. How are we judging staff experience and staff morale? Are we doing anything special?
We're trying to think of the staff alongside the patients completely. I understand them. Having talked to a lot of staff since I joined, the dispatches has wounded them.
Yeah.
There is a moral injury still recovering from the pandemic. We have to consider that. What I'm going to do, particularly with the EDs, because of the level of scrutiny that they're under, is to invite them to some engagement sessions with myself, my deputy, and one of the quality matrons. Literally an open hour. Come and tell me exactly how you're feeling, and then what can we do about that to improve things for you. It is difficult for them. It really is. They are constantly firefighting, particularly last week. We had a number of patients that returned who were extremely demanding and not requiring any ED care, but nowhere else to go, the police returning them. That has its effect when they're trying to care for somebody that requires resuscitation as well. So it's that balancing act. The staff also tell me, because where Shrewsbury and Telford sit within Shropshire, it is difficult sometimes to think, if you were in Birmingham, you can go from one hospital to another to be employed, but it's difficult. And they are saying to me, we can be in a shop and somebody would say to us, oh, you work up the road. Well, what are you doing up there? And be quite aggressive towards them. So that has an effect on them. They don't want to leave here. They want to work here. They live and work here. Their relatives come here, but they're also only human. You know, so there is a number of initiatives that we're looking at, but the one I want to start is this engagement with the EDs at front door.
We've come a long way, and there's some people clapping to wanting to actually.
Yeah. You can go from hero to zero very quickly.
Good. Fine, thank you. Before we move on, I just wanted to ask one question. When I was a little boy, and we went into hospital, we'd be there for days or weeks. You know, if a woman had a baby, they were there for, I think my wife was there for 2 weeks once. It was, you know, quite good for me, but no, seriously though, but is there a target? It seems to have people in hospital now have an operation and they're out within hours. I mean, why is that happening? What's the aftercare? What's going on? How do you do that now when you couldn't do it 10 years ago?
I'll let Ned answer that.
Thank you, and good afternoon, colleagues. Ned Hobbs, Chief Operating Officer at SAF. So I think, Chair, you're absolutely right. Both in planned care, we've seen a consistent increase in the amount of patients that receive day case procedures and are able to go home on the same day as their surgery. I'm really proud of our orthopaedic team at SAF that have introduced day case major joint replacement surgery in the last couple of months at PRH. But also even those patients that do need to stay in hospital overnight are generally staying for shorter lengths of time. And that's also the case in emergency care. So we're managing more patients presenting as an emergency without needing to keep them in hospital overnight. So what we call same day emergency care. There are benchmark standards as opposed to sort of targets per se. So the British Association of Day Case Surgery, for example, has standards for different surgical procedures of what proportion of patients you might expect to be able to go home on the same day. And then in the emergency care pathway, there's again national benchmarking. We're currently managing just over 40% of our medical patients without overnight stay that are presenting as an emergency. And that benchmarks relatively favourably, so just above average across the country, but there's more that we can do. I think to your point about experience, actually there's a really important challenge, not just for SAF, but for all healthcare organisations, of ensuring that it's explained to patients when it is in their clinical interest to remain in hospital, and also when it's when there is no added benefit clinically of remaining in hospital. And I think that's something we can do better, and indeed up and down the country needing to do better. But we talked earlier about the use of precious hospital resources, and ultimately if we can safely and effectively treat patients without keeping them in hospital overnight, that's the best thing for them and the best thing for the overall NHS resource.
I had a few medical things. John Jones, the medical director. So I think that there are medical and nursing reasons. Hi, John Jones, the medical director at SAP. So I think I'm just going to add that there are medical and nursing reasons, big ones. Take abdominal surgery, which is a clear example where you stayed a long time, get a very big wound, and now so much abdominal surgery is done through keyhole technique. And whatever you do on the inside, actually, often what determines how quickly you get better is how big the scar is on the outside. It's extraordinary, really. I think the second thing, a lot of medical treatments just didn't exist. People would be kept in hospital for days with suspected blood clot. Well, we can diagnose whether somebody's got a clot much more quickly, and you can be treated with a simple daily injection, whereas previously you were on continuous infusion. There are good medical and surgical reasons, and the other thing is recognising the importance of nutrition, mobilising people early, people get better more quickly, and hospital. Let's be honest, the recognition that hospital you're not as mobile in hospital, and therefore you're at greater risk of a whole range of things, blood clots, pneumonia, as well as things we talked about around pressure ulcers, etc. So I think there are lots of medical reasons as well, and of course we have many more statistics. We know how well people tend to do when you keep them in for a certain period of time or not. So we know when it's the right thing to do to be able to get people out of hospital early.
So literally, this is going to lead on to virtual water, I imagine, on the next thing on the agenda, because of aftercare, when you send people home fairly quickly, they need some treatment, especially after surgery. I'd imagine it can't just be okay, off you go and take an aspirin. It's going to be you need to go and look after them at home.
Yeah, it's the next
step.
branch, if you like.
Yes.
Patients you treat previously would have treated in hospital, and now you can treat not being in hospital.
Okay.
It's the extension of the same principle.
Yeah. Thank you, John, for explaining that. Two more questions, then we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. Heather.
I'll come back to what you want to do with ED and the staff there. The NHS hasn't got a good reputation for listening to its staff, and so on. So how are you going to get them to trust you? Because the trust is a significant issue. And then I'll say something about people being in hospital. Sorry, my phone was bleeping. Sorry, you should have put it off. So it's the trust thing, and it's a big thing across the NHS. It isn't just at SAF.
No.
It's everywhere. So how are you going to be different and more open?
Well, I was going to say, so we give you a bit of a break, Paul.
Oh, thank you.
I think the walkabouts help. You said we did. I think it's really helpful. We've done a lot of that in maternity in neonatal care, and I think you had a reason rapid turnaround around that, and also the recognition. Staff don't necessarily expect you to fix things; they expect you to acknowledge something that they're trying to overcome. But we've certainly found that. We've been doing a lot of that, particularly in maternity with posters. You said we did, or we listened. It's often right, so we listen.
So how do you measure that trust?
So for me, if I give you an example of what I've done in another trust, particularly around maternity, and it's me meeting with the staff without anybody else.
That's right.
And allowing them to be open and honest with me. And if they allow me to escalate or take things forward, I will. If they don't and they just want to vent, then that's allowed as well. And in one trust, I met 75 midwives over a period of about 3 weeks and separate sessions, and very disgruntled because they'd gone from good to requires improvement, and they were upset by that. And I asked them what they would like me to do. And John's right, it isn't often getting stuff, it isn't actually doing stuff. This one was. And what they wanted was a coffee machine for the staff room. And we got that for them, and things improved.
I think ultimately what we're trying to create is that we're in the business of dealing with people. And we care about people, and there is a strong link between the caring about staff that's linked to the care of that we deliver. So what we're trying to do is through the briefings, and I make no excuse for this, we are trying to be authentic. We are trying to say to people, bring themselves to work. They can't just leave the problems at home. We know people have got financial problems. You know, we know that quite a proportion of our workforce in terms of females are dealing with going through the menopause. You know, what's our policies around that? Have we got different uniforms? Are we supporting men's health? There's a range of things. We're trying to deal with our staff in terms of caring for them, which is really basic. But actually, I have been quite surprised in that I have a very different style to what came before me. But the reception that we're getting back from staff is that they believe as an exec team that we care about them and that we are listening. But the action is, as Paula said, for every bit of that, we have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And staff can raise anything with me. They've got anything where they can raise with freedom to speak up. But actually, you know, people will see this exec team. You know, people will see me whilst they're probably not wanting to ask me back. But, you know, they saw Ned on New Year's Day. Ned was in at Shrewsbury and I was at Telford cleaning trolleys. I'm sure they critiqued me that day. There's something about being visible leadership, and when days are difficult, that actually they see that we're prepared to do the work with them. Mm. And that's going to take some time.
It definitely will take time. And as I said, it's not just SAF, it's across NHS organisations, and they will have to learn. But my last question was, how are you going to measure?
It's really difficult to measure.
Absolutely.
It's really difficult.
Which is why I asked the question.
Yeah, in my previous organisation, which was smaller, we had done about 6 years in terms of making the organisation inclusive and how you measure it. We'll see it in the staff survey. We'll see it in, we've also, as I said, mentioned earlier, we've seen it in terms of our retention rate. Yeah. So we've seen a lot of people wanting to stay at SAF, also recommending SAF as a place to work as well. We see it in terms of our engagement scores. So I think now we are starting to progress this as an organisation. I'm very aware that our board will start saying how we're going to start measuring this. And we'll see it in terms of actually how we free people up to come to, you know, networks, or how you've only got to walk down the corridor as well. So people have a habit of looking at their phones and not picking their head up when they go down the corridors. I can see an improvement in terms of that. We had the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, they came to PR8 2 weeks ago, I think it was. We don't announce visits. Everybody's free to walk around the organisation as long as we know somebody's on site. And they picked up on in terms of how it felt different, that staff were happy in their roles as well. So there's something about actually how we then feed that back, because the other thing is what we don't want to do is that we tell everybody that everything's awful, because actually it isn't. So how we share that improvement, it never was. But actually we need to be, some of it, as I've sat here before, as you know, we are not complacent about some of the things that we need to improve on. Things do need to improve. But there are some really good practice happening, and we need to talk about that and share that with our staff, and also share that with patients who are fearful about coming to our hospitals, because it is not what everybody thinks. We need to help with that.
So I would have put retention in there. I would have put recruitment in there. I would have put exit interviews, staff surveys, all of those things. It's really, really important. I would love when you've actually got those metrics put together for us to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. It's a very important point of how we measure success or failure, really, isn't it? Yeah. David.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first thing to say is I've had feedback along the lines of what's just been said. Everybody knows I know a lot of people, and I have had emails saying that the senior management are much more visible, which raises the question, why were the previous management doing Gemba walks and not picking stuff up? They failed. And that's really quite a bad thing for them to have done. They did not talk as much as they should have done to the staff. So on that point, Chairman, I can give this committee some assurance of what you heard is actually happening. If I can move on to the slides that were presented. First of all, I really enjoyed reading. In fact, I read them 3 times. I mean, I only fell asleep once. But what I really must underline here is we got those slides in advance. They weren't just dumped on us on the day, and that makes a big difference. So thank you very much for that. There's a couple of things on the slides. For example, I think it's the 3rd slide, must do, should do's. You haven't reduced the must do's by 21, you've reduced it by 17.
I think have they still got the wrong slides?
Yeah.
There were 2 lots, weren't there?
I forwarded.
So you're going by the new slides that Sophie sent out?
When did you send them out?
Just during the meeting.
It's only slide 3.
No, I was on the bender last night, so I didn't do any slides.
So there's only slide 3 that's corrected.
Right, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Move
on.
I think that this kind of detail should be systematised and should be coming forward. So hopefully, say in a quarter, you do it again, so we can see before and after. I think that would be a very good thing for the committee to have.
Okay.
That's the good stuff. The trust has never done better than needs improvement. We all know that. So if you look at the top team here, 80% are new eyes. So do you, as people coming in, do you understand why we've never got beyond needs improvement? What's your analysis of that?
A difficult question.
It is indeed.
All right, we'll skip that one. Silence is enough.
You want to answer it or try and answer it?
I am going to have a think. We're meeting tomorrow, so I will think of it. I'm sure you'll ask me again tomorrow, David. So what do I think is different? We are in it. Obviously, lots of things have happened in the organisation. I have come into an organisation that quite a lot of work has been done in terms of maternity, so I haven't had that leadership challenge. So there are different leadership challenges for me to come into and kind of lead. In terms of, I think the number one, it has to be about culture there. Culture, it is everything. I can't talk about who came before. I can only talk in the way that I lead this organisation now, but I would say that some of the feedback that I've got is that culture is everything.
So we've had bad culture for 10 years then.
I'm not saying it's been bad. I'm saying that I think
it's not been successful though.
It's not been successful, but I think there's different things. You know, I pick up the organisation in a very different place than it was 10 years ago. And in terms of, we've already spoke to the CQC last week that says, you know, we want to be good. You know, we want to be outstanding. So how do we do that? So, you know, we want them to come in. We want them to give us the feedback. We want them to come and do our well-led review. And I think, you know, the other thing is we've got a programme called Getting to Good. I've scrapped it. It's not good. Is not good enough. As I've said before, we've had 10 years of inadequate. So we have a programme to get to excellence. And what does that look like? That will be launched in the next few months.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the slide up?
If I may just add to that, I think the other, from a sort of another new person's perspective, if you like, but from the perspective of the ICB, I think the other thing is that SAF isn't an island.
Yeah.
However strong their leadership, whatever their culture, there are always, have always, and will always be things that they cannot do alone. And so I think part of the change that we are looking to create together is that those system relationships, that understanding that we all have a role to play, but actually if we do that together, that's where you'll see the real change. If we are supportive to one another, if we are integrated, if we are joined up in the things that we do, and in that that kind of face that we present to the patients, so that they understand which bit of the system is the right bit of the system to be using, what's the right place for particular things to be presented, understanding that, as John says, you know, we do many more things now in the community than we ever used to. So you will go into SAP for a short period of time, have your keyhole surgery, but you don't come out and you're on your own. You're just looked after by a different part of the same continuum, the same system. And that, I think, will be the biggest change. And it's those relationships and that kind of supporting role that we all play to one another that will be that biggest difference. We've seen it play out over winter this year. We've worked really well with across the ICB, with SAF, with the Community Trust, with social care, everybody absolutely stepping into the space that says there's a patient at the centre of this with a need. And it's, you know, whether that be a need that should be seen in general practice and primary care, whether they need SAF care, whether we can deal with that in a different place in a safe way. We have all seen people over winter take staff from all of the organisations take heroic measures to make sure that that provision is there, which means that this year we've had one critical incident, which we stood up and stood down really quickly, as opposed to this time last year, what was it, something like 21, that went on far longer. So it's a slow process. You know, we're working from the basis of, in many cases, I think you'll recognise a low trust environment with our public, our residents, but it will take a while for us to build that up, but we're committed to doing it together. And that's for me is what will be the difference.
Mr. Chairman, can I stop asking and allow Edward to ask it, and then I'll come back in if Bill.
Okay, if we come too long, if we've spent over an hour on this one already, we've got quite a lot of other things to get on. Yes, Ed.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. But just to follow on from that then, really, how long has ICB been in existence?
2022.
2022, so it's fairly new really, as a body coordinating. So are you saying by what you've just said that actually part of the problem has been ICB getting to grips with the task of coordinating?
Again, I don't think I would want to talk about what happened before I was here. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think relationships change. It can only proceed at the pace of trust, can't it? I think when you change any organisation, and from CCGs, where there was a very clear focus on commissioning, on general practice membership, into an ICB where the focus is completely different. It's on system, inequalities. You know, it takes a while for that organisation, first of all, to function in its optimal way, but also to build those relationships with partners so that we can be transparent with one another. We can be critical friends. So I don't think it's a matter of grip. I think it's an evolution of relationships.
Right, thank you. I think it helps put the context to where SAF is really. The other question I had to ask, and I'm not sure how this relates to what we're looking at in this particular PowerPoint, but I started this journey with you, Tom, way back, and yourself, Heather, but on ambulance waiting times, if you remember those things. And I'm pleased to obviously see and hear David's comments and Derek's progress that seems to be being made for the stuff we've been given. And thanks for being in advance. But it's one marker. It's probably very subjective, but of showing that this improvement is taking place is the fact that the ambulance waiting times are going down, because we haven't really commented on that. I just wondered if it was relevant to this conversation or whether that was something you were taking note of.
We didn't include it as part of the pack because we stuck to the exam question that we were given. But I thought you may ask it, and I'm sure Ned would be really happy because it's something that we monitor on an hourly basis.
Yes, thank you. It would be helpful.
Thank you. So I think the timeliness with which a patient arriving by our ambulance is handed over to our emergency departments is absolutely something that SAF is ultimately responsible for, but that can only happen effectively with all that system working that Lorna's just rightly articulated. And I think from our perspective, it is simultaneously true that too many patients are still receiving handover that is taking longer than we would want. And that's objectively borne out in our ambulance handover delays. But it's also true that in December 2024, the West Midlands had its most challenged month of ambulance handover on record. But in Shropshire, it was considerably better than in the previous most challenged period, which was winter 22-23. So I think there is some objective evidence of progress, but a lot further still to go. There are colleagues I know from Shropshire Community Trust that are joining in the next section. There's more that we're still looking to do together. So at the interface between hospital and community, how do we ensure we can meet the needs of some of our patients without needing an ambulance conveyance to hospital? If they do come to hospital, how can we facilitate their discharge back to a community setting at the earliest possible opportunity? And then very much within the acute sector's responsibility, how do we maximise the flow through the hospital such that we can receive patients in as timely fashion as possible? And we've got more new leadership with good, strong emergency care experience joining us as the trust in the next few weeks, because I think it's also important that we've got colleagues with the right specialist knowledge, the right experience to drive those improvements. So I think in summary, some progress and a lot more still to do.
Yeah, thank you, because I had experience of ambulance care in another country, and it was a lot more rapid than here in the UK. And it's a marker that I think we're generally in the public we're looking at to see they will know progress when that actually starts to take place at the front door.
I don't think it's fortunate we are the service we enjoy. David.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things. First of all, this is on medicine now. At your last board meeting, there was a paper about a nursing staff review, and I see that in medicine, you're planning a 19.62 reduction in whole time equivalent. You'll remember that, yeah? So the question to yourself and to you, John, is if you are going to reduce your staffing by 19.62 in the medicine section, will that have any impact on quality of the medicine that's provided? And will it have any impact on the information you've given us about how well things are going in? As you see it, I don't see it as good as being well or well enough. You do understand that, yes. I'm sure. So 19.62 whole time equivalents you're planning to take out of medicine. Will that have an effect on medicine?
So no, at the moment it won't, because we've the rotas and the rosters and the ratios of nurses to patients is very rich at SAF, very rich indeed, better than I've seen anywhere else. We have to do a biannual review of the establishments to ensure that we've got the right skill mix with the right people and the right place at the right time. It is only right to make sure that we look at those removals. Those are roster removals. So we've often moved them anyway from the roster, so that therefore it's a bit of a numbers game, David, at the moment. We just make sure that we are doing that biannual review. It's all about safe staffing, and we were very rich. So we reviewed all the medical wards and the surgical wards and maternity and paediatrics, and we've put people in, more posts into other divisions and taken out where we know we've still got rich staffing.
But the total for the whole organisation, that's women and children, surgery and medicine, is a reduction of 36.55 full-time equivalents. That's coming out of the system, isn't it?
Coming out of staff.
The system. Most of your expenditures on staff. So if you're taking 36.55 out, that is a reduction both in terms of expenditure and bodies on floor. Yeah.
Correct.
So I don't really accept that there won't be any impact on, I've got to say this, and maybe we'll discuss this tomorrow, but I don't feel that there will be an improvement in medicine. You talk about being rich. I think, Chairman, one of the things I'd like to point out to the committee is that at the last board meeting, there were comments made about how rich the skill mix was, mainly from your non-executives. And the point being that the recommendation is that one nurse should not have to deal with more than 8 patients, correct?
Yeah, that's the RCN guidelines.
Yeah. And you've been using those.
Yes.
What we find in at SATH is that more often than not, it's one nurse per 6 or less, and that's why there is an issue. Are they running rich? Again, I'm not sure that you are, if I'm perfectly honest. You might be in terms of the Royal College 8, but one can pick holes in that anyway.
Yes, of course, and we wouldn't run 1 to 8.
But you are going to run 1 to something.
Yes.
And that something is going to be higher than 1 to 5.5 or.
So we don't just take the ratios separately. You have to triangulate it with the safer care nursing tool, which tells us how dependent our patients are, what the acuity is. We look at fill rates, we look at rosters, we look at ratios, and we look at the nurse sensitive tools. So you take all that into consideration, and you can then, I can see then how a ward is doing by just looking at the safer nursing care tool, which goes from 0 to 1A, 1B, 2 and 3. 2 and 3 is HDU and then ITU. If I saw a 3 on a ward, I'd be concerned. I'd be thinking what? But it's also about making sure that the staff know how to input those dependency and acuity scores. So we've got to take all of that into consideration, and therefore the actual establishment review is done not only with all of those, but with also professional judgment.
Okay.
And that has been led by nurses.
Yeah, but the fact of life is that your system is planning on 36.55 less people, and that the value of that is 1,340,040, just 1 1/3 million. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
So okay, I think I flogged that. There's one more that I need to raise.
It's quick because we've now been an hour and also.
Okay, this is very important, Chair. Very important. On the discharge planning thing that you put up, I have problems with that one.
Okay.
The problems were actually reported to the ICB at its last meeting. And if I may, Chair, I'd like to read what was said. Claire Hobbs commented that SDHT, who are here at the back, had several incidents where they have been concerned about either the handover they have received, where a patient arrives that's different than the one that they were expecting, that late transfers from a quality perspective are a concern, even when the system is not particularly pressured. Their beds, i.e. the community beds, are available before noon, and patients are being admitted at 9 o'clock and sometimes in the middle of the night. A weekly patient safety incident panel meeting is held with the medical director of the community unit to review any moderate incidents. The incidents have also been raised with the director of nursing colleagues. Vanessa Watley added, all the organisations in the system, including MPFT, have been asked about quality of transfer and for information. Some of the information is coming from the NHS to the NHS and care homes. That sentence doesn't read right, but that's what it said. With the pressure to discharge and the speed of discharge, discharging at an untimely hours, medicines are being missed, full stop. Documentation not having been completed. These are the things that are being seen from the information received so far. So basically, we have in public an admission that people, and if we're honest about it, we're talking elderly people, are being moved and transferred out of SAF into another organisation. Sometimes they don't even know the name of the person because it's the wrong name. And various other things are happening, like the medications not recorded. All sorts of bad things are happening. And I'd like to put that against your PowerPoint, which tells us all about discharge. There is a disconnect between that statement, which is a virtual admission of elder abuse, in my opinion, and what you're saying. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Can I just say that you raised an important point. There are concerns about discharge, and as I was alluding to earlier on about length of stay in hospital, you know, these people want to get us out as quickly as possible, and that led us on to virtual wards. So it is a large topic. We haven't got time to discuss it now, but I think we will look at it, and we should look at it in our future work programme, because it is something that does need to be covered, because we've got problems getting people into hospital, and then problems when they're thrown out of hospital, or should they thrown out when they leave hospital into the community, and how they're picked up. And as you're saying, if they're leaving in the middle of the night, social hours and so on, is the system there to cope with it? So I think it's a large piece of work we do need to talk about future. Do you want to comment on it, Jen?
Only to say, Chair, thank you, is that promoting elder abuse in a public meeting concerns me.
Yes.
So I can't comment for colleagues about, I didn't make that comment. It doesn't reflect the system that I think that we work in now. But the colleagues are here for them to ask that question. If patients are discharged late of an evening, then Ned and I will know about it. We sit on the site team, and also we work really well with Shropshire, and that they would raise an incident. But I just think that it's quite alarming to hear that. It's not an organisation that I lead in terms of abuse of patients at all.
Well, as I said, it is something that we do need to look at. We can look at it together.
Thank you.
At a later stage, not today. And we need to move on, but very quickly, do you want to just make one comment? See, we seem to be moving forward in your plans. So the point we'll be discussing is the update in the update at the hospital. Are you happy that it's going the right way and at the right speed? But please be brief.
It needs to be quicker. Pace is important. I think in terms of the actions I'll take away, in terms of Simon and Liv will meet together, there's no reason why we can't do that. We need the voice of the patient, so that's really important to us. And I think it is in the fact the organisation had 60 conditions on its licence. It has 2 remaining, and we are committed to removing those last 2 at pace.
Excellent. That's good news. Well, can I thank you all for coming? It has been an interesting discussion. And and it will be continued, rest assured. So thank you very much for what you do. You have addressed quite a lot of the issues. I can see that. So let's look forward to the next report and hopefully they're all resolved by then. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Room 2. Can we discuss Shropshire Community Health Trust virtual wards?
Yeah. Do you want me to stay?
If you wish, you can stay if you wish. It's entirely up to you. If it's beneficial for you, you and us, then perhaps I recommend you do stay.
Steve Rotchwood.
Good. Well, thank you and welcome. Would you like to introduce yourselves? And I don't know who's going to be your spokesman. Are you want to talk together or what? To operate these, press one button. When it lights up, you can speak. Please give us your name.
Hello, I'm Patricia Davis. I'm the Chief Executive for Shropshire Community NHS Trust. I'm here with my colleagues, Gemma MacGyver, who is the Deputy Director of Operations, and Dr. DeMann, who is one of the consultants that provides clinical leadership and clinical care within the virtual ward.
Thank you. Do you want to talk to us about virtual wards? We had concerns, not concerns, we had questions at the last few meetings about everybody is saying we're leaving hospital, you're going out into the community. How is their healthcare going to be continued to be looked after? And I gather one of my concerns is it's only for a short period of time. So what happens after then? So all the agencies need to work together. And I'd just like a better understanding of how that actually happens.
Before I hand over to Gemma, who can give an introduction and some context and background and history to the virtual ward, in terms of discharging patients from hospital, the virtual ward provides, it isn't just about discharge, we also look at how we prevent patients going into hospital in the first instance through the use of virtual ward. But we have a plethora of community services that intervene, from rapid response call services to other integrated discharge teams that provide coordinated discharge services, and virtual ward is one of those. So if I hand over to Gemma, you can talk about virtual, what it means, and how we got here, how many patients were treated, and next steps.
I always panic about the button.
No problem.
Okay. The button's the most stressful bit when you yeah.
50-50 chance. But anyway.
Okay, so if I give us just a little bit of an overview of virtual ward and where we are now and where we're hoping to be as well, our next steps, and then anything from a clinical perspective, and certainly to make sure that we get the patient voice in, and then we'll be able to also talk a little bit further. So I guess for us, our journey into getting us to a virtual ward actually kind of began in 2019. I'm sure many of you were aware at that time that we launched our rapid response offer. So we'd had a rapid response team in Telford for quite a number of years, but we rolled that out for a consistent county offer over to Shropshire. And our rapid response pathway is for the first 72 hours. So for 72 hours, that's to stabilise and treat admission avoidance patients. So virtual ward, when it launched for us in 2022, is a really welcomed opportunity for us to be able to expand that pathway, exactly as you kind of described. So we're now in a place where we can have 72 hours of rapid treatment, but actually to be able to keep our patients out of hospital for longer, we're able to now admit them onto the virtual ward. So from an admission avoidance perspective, that's brilliant, but it also means that we can do a lot of step down from hospital with a view that obviously if patients can, and I think they were talking about that from with staff before, we can shorten that length of stay that would have historically been within an acute perspective, so that you can continue your period of recovery at home. And as Patricia's just mentioned, we're then very lucky in terms of the community services that we have available to us as a provider, so that if Dr. Doman and his team feel that that patient needs ongoing care, which in many cases they don't, but if they do, then we can then potentially discharge them onto a district nursing team, onto the respiratory team, onto a diabetes specialist team for that ongoing support longer term. So for us, as today, we have across our rapid response teams and our virtual ward, we have circa 90 staff now. Again, I think being able to launch that rapid response bit has been really important in terms of the journey that we've been able to go on. We find virtual ward and rapid response is actually an area that we recruit really well to. People want to come and work in it. I can tell stories, and I'm sure if the team were here, they'd be able to tell better stories, but we've got now, because of the time we ran, evidence of nurses who started with us as newly qualified nurses as band 5s that have now gone through and they're prescribing. So it's been able to really offer a lovely career path for quite a lot of our clinicians in county. Our model, it has our consultant, we've got GP, we've got advanced care practitioners, we've got pharmacy technicians, nurses, paramedics, therapists and HCAs. So a really diverse clinical workforce. In terms of where we're at, so just a little bit of our caseload demographics, we've got roughly there or thereabouts our step up, so that's our admission avoidance onto the virtual ward, and rapid response is about 54% of our total activity. When we benchmark that nationally, it's 46% is the national kind of just above that benchmark, and our step down is 46%, so that's patients being admitted earlier from our acute hospital. Nationally, that sits at 35%. Now, nationally, they also record an other category, which we're not capturing locally, so that's something we want to look at. So 19% of a national picture, which we don't record, are patients admitted onto the virtual ward, but they might already be on a community caseload potentially, so they might not necessarily need to go in, so to avoid an admission, but they might need just a heightened support potentially through a digital solution or something like that. So we are certainly doing some of that, but I'm not sure from our capturing whether we could maybe look at that slightly different when we look at national guidance. In terms of just some really high level numbers then, so since we've launched, 6,184 patients have been admitted onto our virtual ward. We run at about approximately 66.8% occupancy. And the national target is 85%, and we have hit 85% on occasion. But I think it's a really arbitrary measure that we're working with the national teams to understand a little bit more, because what the occupant, it's easier in an acute hospital to measure occupancy because it's a bed for a bed, isn't it? In our virtual ward, our acuity levels, and there isn't a virtual ward acuity tool, although Dr. Doman's looking at how we can introduce that with our clinical teams. So although our occupancy in terms of the number of people on our virtual ward might seem low sometimes, quite often those people could have up to 4, 5, 6, 7 visits to keep them safe, and that obviously uses quite a bit of our workforce capacity. Also, our rapid response service consistently run at 100% occupancy. On occasion, they have actually run at 200%, and we flex our workforce depending on the needs across the patch at the time. So that's kind of how we work on a day-to-day basis operationally. In terms of pathways, so there are lots of clinical pathways that Dr. Doman, I'm sure, will be able to expand on further. But 70% of our virtual ward locally are frail, so it's a frailty pathway of some description. From a national perspective, it's generally 35%, so I think it really shows that our demographics kind of represent our caseloads. We have 57% of the virtual ward are men, 42% are women, and we take our referrals from across the entire county. In terms of bits that we're doing next, so next steps for us from a virtual ward perspective, it's great to see Lynn, but we're certainly linking in with HealthWatch so that we get as much rich data around actually what's it like to be on the virtual ward, and we've had some conversations in the background about how we can do that moving forward. We're looking constantly at how we can expand pathways. So in the last couple of weeks, we've just rolled out a surgical pathway to be able to take more surgical patients earlier. And I know that Dr. Bowman's really passionate about palliative care locally, and I think we see a real opportunity to be able to expand our end of life offer through the virtual ward. So that's something we're really working on. Ned was talking about integration at the front door. And as part of our winter schemes this year, we've started to recruit into some roles whereby we can support some senior decision makers Dr. Doman does it quite regularly so that they can go into the front door, really integrate with ED, the frailty assessment unit and other areas to be able to signpost and actually have those live conversations about the virtual ward could offer this, although we've got criteria, we could flex our criteria, we could do these things. So that's happening constantly to keep raising the profile and support our clinicians, particularly when they're under enormous amounts of pressure and stress and demand, to keep thinking virtual ward as an option and rapid response as an option. As part of that, we're having regular road shows, and they will continue all year round, whereby we're able to promote with primary care, but also with our ambulance service to be able to support that constant kind of thought when they're seeing patients in front of them. We've got our RRU, so our rehab and recovery units, so they're now 12 months, and we certainly see some opportunity there. So actually you could see a really nice pathway now whereby you could avoid the deep bed base altogether, come from a frailty assessment unit potentially into a bedded area, so the rehab and recovery units for whatever short intervention, and then on to the virtual ward. So that's something we're really passionate about continuing to drive. And I think the other massive opportunity for us is around our interface with social care. So the virtual ward guidance is a little bit vague in terms of who holds responsibility for some of those patients if they need domiciliary care as well as some virtual ward intervention. We're working really closely with our local authority partners to see how we can expand that further to be able to support more and more people. We have got some healthcare assistants as part of our virtual ward so that they're able to offer some of that personal care and domiciliary care, but I think we'd be able to have more scope and support more people with some more access potentially to domiciliary care. So that's another area that we'd be developing.
Good, thank you. Before I throw it to the floor, I know we've got lots of people who want to ask questions. Can I just ask two things before we get a chance? The last time we had a discussion, I said, where are all the virtual wards in the county? And the answer was at home. That wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to know locations or areas or whatever. Just think about this one. I'd like to know the percentage of people that return back to hospital and their ages. Are we talking about really looking? I know there's a high percentage of elderly people. Are we talking about looking after elderly people, or are we talking about actually helping them after they've had an operation? And I know Heather will probably mention, because she has mentioned it a few times before, about patients being dispatched back home with catheters and so on, and not knowing how to use them. So there's all these sorts of issues. So anyway, have a think about those questions, because I would like to know if we're just looking after people for a period of time before we find another pathway to put them into care or whatever. I'm interested in the medical side of what they have, what they get, what they gain, and are they safe? Those sorts of issues is what I would like to find out. But let's see what the questions come. So Heather.
Well, one of my questions, I've got somebody got a sorry, yeah. It's that point of somebody's being discharged from hospital. I'll give you two cases from SAT who are, how are they, the clinicians then make a decision about whether they go into a virtual ward, presumably, or whether they need a district nurse. The two cases I can mention both live in Shropshire. They both have GPs in Shropshire. They both have Welsh postcodes. In both cases, they didn't get either. One had a catheter and the family really didn't know what to do with it, and she was readmitted after that twice. So actually the system fell really short for that person. And she's in her 70s and her husband is also in his 70s. They just couldn't cope. The GP said it's nothing to do with ASCAR. And the district nurse who rang up said, oh, if we come out to you once, we'll have to come out several times. You're a long way out. And the second one had an open wound, which was packed. And they couldn't get a district nurse because we told them they had to go to Paris for one. And Paris said, no, you're in Shropshire. It's not ours. So there was I had to actually get Rachel to deal with that. How are we going to deal with those people who are discharged from hospital, live in Shropshire, do not qualify for a virtual ward, and it appeared on this occasion for a district nurse because they wouldn't come out on either occasion, who happen to have Welsh postcodes? I live in Shropshire. I have a Welsh postcode. The guy up on Martin Hill has a Welsh postcode. 10 yards down the road, he's in Powys. He's still Shropshire with a Shropshire GP. So there's a real problem with actually making sure people, when they leave SAF, get the appropriate care. Now, that was a Welsh postcode issue. It wasn't recognised either by SAF or by Shropcom or whoever. But this must happen on other borders, other places with other postcodes. So you have a fantastic system that, if it works well, needs to work well, but didn't.
So the virtual ward covers all GP reg, so registered GPs in Shropshire and Telford Region.
Yeah.
So that patient was not referred. Both patients were not referred actually there. So we can only rely on that. But from a commissioning point of view,
They came from SAF.
yes. So they weren't referred to the virtual ward.
No, that was my point.
Yeah. So what my point is, we can only take what is referred. So, but talking about what you were asking specifically, we have so the virtual ward in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin is for any virtual ward. So any patient registered to a Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin general practitioner. There is a virtual ward in Wales. So these border issues as well. So this is what obviously we're talking about specifically here. But if we're talking about, we've had cross-charge agreements for patients that are in different kind of localities. So people that do live in Shropshire and they've got a Welsh GP, for example, we've cross-charged the Welsh system. So there are arrangements.
It's not my point.
Conditioning, but we can only go by what was referred.
So they were referred to have a district nurse and got nothing.
But
I think probably the way of resolving this, Heather, as somebody that is a district nurse and a practicing district nurse, is to be able to, if those individuals would be kind enough to share their story, because then we can actually look at the detail of it and see where things fell down.
One of the
doctors
has put in a formal complaint.
Okay, that's good.
I doubt that they're 80 up on the hill. I doubt that they have or will. I will ask Martin whether he would do that. But the point here isn't that. It's a system, and you were talking about the whole system, not just work for virtual wards. And this is a fundamental issue where the systems are broken down.
Sure.
Which needs to be picked up, because he was seriously ill up there with a packed wound.
Yeah.
And then they were having to fight for care, which is not great. That was the issue. When you get a district nurse, I'm not saying that they're not great, they are. But actually, the system is not picking those people up. And I have a feeling that maybe one of them certainly should have been on a virtual ward, because they weren't very well at all.
Yeah, and it as Dr. Mann said,
it's down to
step
that.
up and step down. So actually, if the GP could have referred into the virtual ward, not just SAF. So there's a piece of learning there for everywhere. But I will. It will tell me it's not for the name now, but we can follow up that complaint and have a look.
I do have one of the complaints, so I'll forward it to you.
Thank you.
Yes, David.
Can you tell me if the out of hours contract, which is a subject of great debate at the moment, has it got cover for the virtual ward as part of the specification?
Oh.
The answer is no, it hasn't.
At the moment, we provide a service up to 8 o'clock in the evening. And if patients require care outside of that, then they will receive care from two sources, either the out of hours GP, rather than a specific contract to the virtual ward, as I would receive from the out of hours GP, or if they were very unwell, they would go back through the hospital system.
But there's no out of hours virtual ward cover in the out of hours specification. You would know, because obviously you have to be.
No, I don't believe it does. No,
there isn't any.
Not in it.
No. So what will happen in future, because it's not built in, is that if I was in one of your virtual wards, which I'm looking forward to being one day, I'm sure I'll get great service. I'll only get your service 8 till 8. Then after that, if I go off, we all know what going off means. I'll contact 111 and then they will put me through, if need be, to the out of hours service. That's how it happens now. And there's no intention to change that in the specification from what you've just said.
Unless the commissioner wants to sort of comment further in terms of what's in the new specification. At the moment, we finish at 8, and patients that require a service receive it from out of hours, as they would as a normal patient.
Yeah, as you know, I like numbers. So I had a look at the December production figures, and your average occupancy is 56.3. That's national government figures, so you must have provided them. In other places, it's a lot higher than that. For example, Hereford and Worcester, it's 92% occupancy. Leicester, 100% occupancy. Lincolnshire, where your chair in common comes from, 92.9% occupancy. Northamptonshire 91.6 and Nottingham 91.9. So they're doing significantly. I mean, it's not a marginal number. It's a big number, different from you. So why are you not performing at that kind of occupancy rate?
Do you want to go?
Well, I'll start and then. So I think for me, there's two pieces to that, and we've only got one element. So as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, we have followed national guidance in terms of how we have created and our workforce. So yes, you've seen the virtual ward occupancy, but what you haven't seen in that I think is really important, where we have run well above 100% occupancy, is the rapid response element. So when that rapid response in that first 72 hours has come in for us locally, and I think probably all the challenges we've had at the beginning of the year in December would demonstrate that, our focus has been on avoiding admission avoidance in that 72 hours as fast as we possibly can to keep our patients from going to the front door, which we know has been incredibly pressured. So that is where we've diverted our workforce through to for that period, and that's why we are running, I would say, probably higher than most of the national averages in terms of that first 72 hours.
Got to point out to you that a rapid response, if you look at the definition of a rapid response, it is different from a virtual ward definition. Yeah. So you're conflating apples and pears here. I'm sorry, I don't accept your answer.
So for me, there is another piece as well, and that is occupancy versus turnover. Mm-hmm. So the occupancy is how many patients are held in that service at that particular time. What it doesn't take account of is either how long they've been in the service and what treatment they've been received. So, for example, when we have been approaching periods of extreme pressure, what we have spoken with the virtual ward and the rapid response service about doing is freeing up as much capacity as it is safe to do. So where there are patients who are coming towards the end of their journey with virtual ward saying, would it be safe to at this stage hand that patient back to their GP? Would it be safe at this stage to make that connection to district nursing or to the respiratory community teams or whatever today as opposed to tomorrow? And so what you then have is patients who are, what you might then see is a reduction in occupancy because we're asking for an increase in the turnover of the patients. So I think, to be fair to the team, there are two elements to consider, and what we don't look at, what we don't map is the turnover, because the national metric is occupancy.
Right, and I'm sure all these other organisations would be making points like that. Can I just ask, what is the budget and how many staff have you got in your virtual wards, please?
Can I just comment on your occupancy question, please?
I didn't ask an occupancy
No,
question.
just to say that our figures are lower. So you picked probably the lowest occupancy months that we've had, December there. The average is about 68% across our virtual wards across the year we're looking at it. So we have more sicker, probably the wrong way to phrase it, but more medically unwell patients compared to other virtual wards. The level of our frailty and the general unwellness of the patients and the interventions we offer are higher than other virtual wards across the country.
Can you prove that?
Yes, I can.
Would you like to send the proof in?
I can show you, because I've done audits of the patients on the virtual ward. So I have looked at if I would, as a consultant, have kept that patient in hospital compared to at home, and I've looked at length of stays. So we run at about 0.8%. Sorry, 0.8 of a staff bed day. So if you're on the virtual ward, it's worth 0.8 of a SAC bed day, a hospital bed day. The NHS modelling is a 0.62 of a bed day. So we are far above that. So we are saving more bed days despite it looking like you've got less number of patients. Okay, so that's very important when you look at those numbers, to understand that, to see that across the country the frailty virtual ward number is lower. It's the percentage on the frailty virtual wards are lower compared to ours, where the vast majority of patients are frailty patients, and they have longer hospital stays, they require more intervention, and therefore your saving or your reduction in length of stays is greater. Therefore, when you look at occupancy as a single number, it's a bit unfair, because what you could do is we could have 200 patients on the virtual ward, no problem at all tomorrow. But would we be helping the system, reducing bed days, reducing hospital attendance, improving outcomes, doing that by simple remote monitoring? We could have 200 on there, I could watch it from the screen, but I would not be improving the outcomes of Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin people. What we are doing is seeing patients, we're trying to keep them out of the hospital. We are trying to keep the patient that would be in hospital out. So that is the difference. So it's fine. I could run this virtual ward at 200% occupancy, but would I be doing something useful? No. So as a clinician, as a human, I wouldn't feel I'd be helping the system by doing that. So I can tell you for sure, a lot of those virtual wards with 100% capacity are just remote monitoring. This is a proper hospital at home virtual ward.
And you can prove that.
Of course I can.
Well, I've been delighted to see your paper.
Prove it.
Can you go on to the staffing and cost, please?
Perhaps we could discuss that in detail again, such as your other point, that it is an important detail that I understand exactly what you're saying, and it's information that I wanted to know, that are you just looking after people or are you actually treating people who treated people? But is it worth something that we should pursue?
I think it is, Chairman, because we basically, no disrespect, but you do need the evidence to come to a scrutiny committee that you were doing better than anybody else. And then we can share it with other people, or I could, in other ICBs, and say, this is what they're saying, what have you got? I mean, the fact is that in England, the average length of stay, the average occupancy was 75.4, which is still higher than your 56. Now, if you take England as a, look, I printed it out this morning.
You're talking about December though, but what Jen, that you pick 1 month, so our average is what is it?
It's 66.
All right.
So
we better stop here, but I think, Chairman, that we do need more information.
Well, I agree with you, more information. And we are running short on time, so I think.
Can I just have an answer to the cash and number?
Okay, you can answer that question. But what I would like to say before we move on to other people is, there are going to be questions, and with your agreement, I'd like to be able to send those to you in writing, and perhaps we can get a response. So we've got time to think about it properly. Are you happy to do that?
More than happy, and I've got a bit of a slide pack as well that we often share with other people, so we can forward that. That's got some of the benchmarking information that I think, David, that will be really helpful. We can add a little bit further about workforce. We've got a really lovely video as well that the clinicians have created with some of our patients, which I think really brings it to light. And I think would certainly really support in terms of that idea that this is a hospital at home service. As we've said before, this is a service that is delivered in people's own homes. From locally, we have a higher level of face-to-face contact than most other virtual wards. So we do have a remote monitoring system, and we're looking to enhance that further. And we certainly know that our clinicians have chosen that, and we think it will really support to keep patients safe at home. But it's been really important to us from a Shropcon perspective that the majority of our care is delivered in a patient's home. So that means seeing a clinician those days up to 4, 5, 6 times a day to be able to support all of that element.
Good, thank you. Are you able to send us this presentation?
Yeah, not a problem at all.
Yeah. As my colleagues have said to me, it'd be nice if we had that for the meeting or prior to the meeting. I mean, what we're trying to get at, we're all saying virtual wards are wonderful, but we're not entirely sure exactly if they're sustainable, exactly what is happening. And I just don't want them to be someone looking out and feral people to get them out of the bed. I thought they were there for medical treatment for people and so on. So can I move on, Derek?
When people give us evidence as scrutiny, we're not here to be rude to them. And I just feel that sometimes we've gone over the board. Quite frankly, talking to the ICB, when you were first formed, I had the great vision that, hey, this is a really way to do things, actually having an integrated system. And to be honest, community care has been the only realistic way that you've actually been doing it, because it hasn't happened in the hospitals. They take the largest percentage of money, as I've already said before, and yet the work that should be getting done, and a lot of them people in them hospitals could be done equally as well in their own homes, in their own care. But we need to actually make sure that the transition from money from urgent into community happens, because quite frankly, it is a way to go. We can't keep on having and buying big bloody buildings to hospital that keep people in, when we can be having them in their own homes and looked after much better and recovering better, because that's the system. There is holes in it at the present moment. Of course there is holes. And I mean, at the weekend, I came up, a lady called me up, went around, 80 years old, hallucinating. Mental health wouldn't, 111, 112 wouldn't deal with it, mental health. 111, we'll refer them to the doctors Monday. In the meantime, 2 days by herself in a home. But it's actually how we get people into the system. It's actually people like that who are vulnerable. It's not just about, and it is this mixture between social care and community care. It should be almost invisible. They should be working far closer together, So we do have this seamless approach that you were set up to do. And we really need to make sure that, it's about how people know, because people don't understand. They don't understand virtual hospitals. They don't understand care in the community and all the rest of it. but they should be. And we've got to spend a lot of time telling people, explaining to people how to get into it, what they need, because they don't always need to go to the doctors. And quite frankly, if you're 80 years old with no transport, getting into your damn doctor is a huge problem in the first place. So there is an opportunity of having like community nursing, people coming out and seeing them in their own home, because that's the way we should be going. We should be looking at keeping people in their homes, not transporting them out. And you've got a big job to actually start changing the money from urgent care into community care. So prevention at the beginning. Thank you.
Before Lorna comes in, thank you. I completely agree. And I think the virtual ward is one element of community services that can absolutely support that. Do we think that we want to expand our virtual wards so that we're increasing both the occupancy, albeit I think we've had the clinical kind of point of view that we are treating patients that are have a high level of acuity, and I'm really proud of that. But the question that we should be saying is, how do we put that on steroids, frankly, so that our 66% average over the year becomes a 90% occupancy rate? And that's the next shift in terms of being able to do that. Part of that is through the conversations that we're having here. Your point exactly, sir, that we need to be raising awareness through our wider clinicians, acute clinicians, in terms of greater referrals, our GPs, we heard earlier, chemists and others, and the general public to say this is a safe service. And in fact, there was a longitudinal study published in May 2024 by a research company, PPI. Nigel Edwards, who was the chief executive of the King's Fund, oversaw that research project. It was commissioned on behalf of NHS England, that looked at across the southeast, including Kent and Sussex, that have pockets of rurality, the impact of virtual wards across that area. And it proved that both from an economic point of view, but also from a patient outcome point of view, that the virtual wards make sense, particularly from the human cost element, because if you can be treated at home, return to your level of independence, or stop from deteriorating further, then that's good news for the human being. And it's good news for wider society as well. They also pointed to the fact that there's probably longer socio-economic impact in terms of not having the issue around buildings, the longer term reduction in care that's required for that individual, and so on. So I think the question around whether virtual wards are a good thing or not has already been answered and proven. The question for us as a system, your point, how do we integrate our virtual ward and embed it further? I think we've had some real successes. There's a long way to go. And this is about how we bring that together with our partners, GPs and others, to not only increase the occupancy rate, but also to target more patients that will benefit from the service and stop people from going into hospital inappropriately and get them out quicker. That's the key aim, I think.
I think the mistake was calling it virtual heart. It should have been and was and should have been here in the community.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's a community service by nurses, doctors, hospitals working together. And quite frankly, I really believe there's a huge opportunity for it. And I think so many people would benefit from it. And I think you could prevent so many. But not only that, you could help people pass into the next world.
Can I suggest that we?
My apologies.
That we.
I'll leave it at.
2 more questions. Can I
15
suggest that perhaps we have a further meeting, or whatever we can see? You're expressing the desire to grow what's going on, and I think we'd like to understand how and when that will happen and what we can all do to help. Lynn, would you like to say something about the health touch?
Yeah, no, just a few things really. I think from my point of view, the thing that's really important is to hear from people who've used virtual ward, which is why. Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry. I think it's really important that we hear the experiences of people using the virtual ward, because wouldn't it be great to share a good news story?
Yeah.
The things that I think are particularly relevant for the public go back to things like Jeff's question about coverage, access across Shropshire, Telford and Lincoln. And for me, I think the challenge of providing virtual wards in this county must be immense. So it'd be very helpful to understand those challenges and what needs to happen to make it possible to do it in a much more straightforward way, because this is the future of so much of the NHS long-term plan is being able to provide care for people in their own homes or in their communities. So for me, it's about understanding so far where you've managed to get to with this, and where the challenges are, how you're able to do that, or if any rural proofing has been done by the people who've told you to do it and told you how to do it. The outcome and impact piece for me is massively important, and the outcome and impact does relate to that patient experience, but it also relates to some of those numbers. You know, how many people, and sometimes it's very hard to prove, but you can have a best guess on how many people you've managed to keep out of hospital. And I also do think it's a fair question to say how many people that you've gone through a virtual ward might have ended up in hospital anyway, because that's bound to happen, and understand the circumstances that happens. For me as well as Health Watch, I think because it's called virtual wards, which you had no control over, that was in the NHS long-term plan, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the public. And so that, again, that falls back to my piece of work to try and help people to understand what it is and what it isn't. And that's why I helped contribute to the video, which I think, you know, it's really important that people get to see it and it gets to be developed. And for me as well, I think, you know, when I found the doctor's description of occupancy really helpful. So thank you for that, you know, and what is behind the numbers, because there's always something behind the numbers. And for me, I think your challenge is you're working in a system where a lot of the public have sort of, their trust in services is probably at its lowest. But that also means we've got a workforce across our system who have responsibilities towards their patients. And giving that responsibility to another service must be incredibly hard, because nobody wants to do the wrong thing. So it'd be really interesting to know where your referrals are coming from at the moment. And for me, just feeding into what I think Derek mentioned, is if some of these referrals are coming from your GP, and so many people are having trouble seeing a GP, I'm sort of wondering how many people have fallen through the gap. Exactly. For example, my family of older people, elderly people, virtual ward would have been perfect, but it never touched them. So what I'm interested in as well is how people are getting it, who's getting it, and who isn't getting it, and why they're not getting it. And maybe that's something that we could look at in the future.
So thank you. Before you do, I just don't think we want. That's why I'd like to take this discussion further, separate occasion, because I don't think we just want statistics. We actually want to understand. As Lynn said, the public don't want to understand it. We should understand it, and we maybe don't totally. Thanks for that. We are over our limit, so we shouldn't, you know, meeting should have actually been closed. Ed, can you ask you?
Mine very quick and just clarification. It's just possible from what you just said, Chair, really. Derek, my understanding is referrals to virtual ward come through the hospital.
Yeah.
And GP.
So that's GPs, right? Okay. So
and ambulance service and care coordination.
Right. Okay. So I'm just wondering how.
And sometimes themselves.
Coming down, as if we're stepping down from hospital, there is a way of, as Derek was saying, of the GP or getting access into the virtual ward the other way.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the first thing. Thank you. The second thing was the data that you gave us originally, a lot of facts. I presume that's going to be minuted, or you'll be producing a sheet for us to have.
Yeah, I'll definitely produce a sheet. I think it'll be really helpful if we also give some further examples, because I feel today we've still not been able to provide exactly what you wanted. I think for me, just touching on that, hanging on the bit that's been said in the background. I have my career has been for the last 17 years in Shropshire, Telford and Lincoln, and I've worked across local authority, the acute and the community trust. This is the thing I'm the most proud of. The fact that we have this for our patients is incredible. And in terms of that, are they just being babysat on a service? Absolutely not. Whilst we've been waiting outside today, Dr. Doman's been taking calls from clinicians. I've heard him saying in the background, can you run bloods again? I'll review them later. Perhaps we could get some oxygen in. Perhaps we could do other things. We've got patients at home now having IV antibiotics. Their observations are being taken every 2 hours from their own houses. So in terms of that actual hands-on intervention that you would be otherwise receiving 12 months, 18 months ago in a hospital, that is happening in people's houses now. And for a rural area, I honestly didn't think we'd ever have something that has been this successful so far. I think our challenge is making sure that it's more consistent, that more people can get it and they can get it first time, and that is happening. We can support more people. In relation to your referrals, we have referrals from care homes, GPs, ambulance service. We've done so much work recently with the Care Coordination Centre, domiciliary care, and something that we're piloting and we're getting a lot of national attention for, which was a Dr. Doman brainchild that I'm really passionate about, is actually patients that we know with long-term conditions, particularly respiratory conditions, they're able to refer themselves. That is not a national thing, that's not a nationally prescribed, but how empowering for a patient. I know normally when these things start to happen to me, my only option is 999. Well, it isn't anymore. It's actually, I've been on the virtual ward, maybe that could support before a next intervention. So that's really exciting for us, I think.
Thank you. We do a lot of promotions, be the right word, or selling and trying to tell and gain trust of other clinicians of the public in this service. It's something different. Care away from the hospital. The hospital is perceived incorrectly as a safe place, a safe environment. However, we are well aware it's not. So this is the public perception, and also, sadly, clinicians' perceptions as well, is if you're poorly, I'll send you to hospital and you'll be safe there. So this is not good. So we're shifting, as most people have said across here, that we're trying to shift it away from the hospital and in the community and build that trust and buy-in to that. We do get referrals from a myriad of services. So this is working slower than anticipated. We want those numbers of occupancy to go up, despite what I said. We still do want those numbers up, but ultimately we want to be doing the best we can in the right place and the right time for our patients, and hopefully we can do that.
And it's important that those numbers are the right numbers. So from a performance perspective, and highlighting some of our performance data earlier, the definition for a virtual ward is if you do not have this intervention, you will be in hospital. And our team, we really live by that principle. So on the rare occasions they let me gate crash and MDT, they absolutely, that is their criteria for admission and discharge, that we make sure, exactly as Norma's just highlighted, we've got capacity to take the most poorly patients and we can respond as soon as we need to. We're not keeping patients on our books for the sake of performance either. And I think that's really important.
All right. Someone asked about readmission. The acceptable readmission is up to 20%. Ours is at about 8 or so, 8% back to a deep bed base. So it's not bad, let's say. Yeah.
Just a point of clarity about what Dr. Stone just said, and aware that this is a public meeting. We mentioned that going into hospital isn't always safe. I think in STW we need to make it really, really clear for everybody that that isn't a comment on SAF specifically, that is a comment that relates to, we know that particularly for the frail elderly, admission to hospital leads to complications that are avoidable, like deconditioning, hospital-acquired infection, loss of independence and mobility, and that they are unintended consequences of that stay. But absolutely, if we can do things differently to prevent that, then absolutely we should, and that's absolutely where virtual ward comes into it.
Thank you. Final question, Heather.
So, how well do you think GPs understand the possibility of them referring? Because my experience has not been great.
I think there's more to go at as we've spoken today. As you can see, the step up figures are over 50%, which is good, but that's step up not just from GPs, but a wider cohort of clinicians. So I think we've got more to do educationally, actually, with our GPs. It's that building trust, but also building their understanding, particularly within some of our smaller practices within rural areas. That takes more sort of time. In bigger practices, of course, you've got more backup facilities, people understand it a little bit more perhaps. So I think there is more work that we need to do with primary care and generally, and actually this conversation's been really, really helpful in terms of your backing and support of, you know, how we can perhaps do that together.
It is a very good system. It's just that it's little understood still.
Could be a system.
Yeah.
And I would be really grateful if my GPs understood it much. Not mine. Mine's in Montgomery, different. But those in my area who are in England.
I understand.
Yeah.
Access number.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. I would like to discuss with the committee that we continue this conversation again, because I found it helpful. I hope you have,
Yes.
but I think we are discovering that there are one or two problems that could be ironed out with logistic wise, with the catheters or with the rurality and not being able to get phone signals and all that sort of stuff, and how you use equipment at home and training, and that, you know, there's such a lot we'd like to discuss. So I think we'll have a chat. We'll probably send you some questions, and if you could send us your work you were going to bring and didn't, that's great. So thank you very much indeed for coming. Anything you want to ask us before you go?
No, just thank you for the open discussion, because I think that's helpful. The Scrutiny Committee is about scrutiny, but it's also about how do you help support getting the right outcome. So thank you for your thank you for your commitment.
There is a lot of outcomes that need supporting, and you need to make it sustainable for everybody. So you would obviously love to come back. I know you would. So.
Yes, agree. No, I agree. I think it's a good onward conversation. Not just virtual ward though, but your point for wider community services. I
send you the email.
Thank you very much.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. You may go if you want, or if you'd like to listen. It's all up to you. Item 6 on our agenda, the co-chairs update. My colleague Fiona Regan is going to give that to you now. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, as you will remember, at our last meeting in December, we decided to write to the Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Oswestry thing. So I'd just like to confirm that this letter was actually sent to the Secretary of State on the 24th of January 2025. It outlined the community's concerns and findings and requested a meeting with the Secretary of State and local healthcare system representatives to identify the necessary help and resources required locally. The letter also highlighted the financial and physical challenges faced by the local demographic and geographical context. Committee's letter was also shared with local MPs for their awareness and can be viewed as a link from the agenda for today's meeting under the chairman's item. It has also been shared with town and parish. It will also be shared with town and parish councils through SALP, and I'm sure you will have seen that it's been picked up in the media locally. We look forward to receiving a response from the Secretary of State. Moving on to the next item, we have a statement regarding the Shropshire out of hours contract award. As a committee, we're acutely aware that there are concerns expressed regarding the ongoing process of awarding the out of hours GP contract and the associated services. We understand the importance of these services and our residents and the impact that any changes or expected impact may have on the access to quality healthcare. In light of these concerns, our recommendation as joint chairs is to seek assurances from Shropshire Cheltenham and Wrekin Integrated Care Board, ICB, that the quality of service provided will remain the same, if not improve, as a result of the appointment of the chosen provider, and how the ICB will be ensuring that this happens.
it is imperative that the ICB ensure that the new provider upholds the highest standard of care that our communities have come to know and expect and rely upon. We'll continue to monitor this closely. Now, I understand that an email question on this subject has been forwarded to myself and Jeff, and we will look at that and seek to get some answers from the ICB. Eric.
Could I ask that our next online workshop involves this?
That was one of the discussions that we had at our pre-meeting to look
Yeah, I'm talking about when we have our online on it.
Yeah. So our next informal meeting or workshop meeting is on the 24th of February. So I think
I've never seen so much public concern
yeah.
about any decision.
Yeah.
Because it seems that the only part of the system that is actually working is now being screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the point. We don't know the ins and outs of the contract, and I'm led to believe that the contract is cost saving, but it's also
should be about money,
reducing the work load in the community. So what we need to decide now, or in fact now, is how we seek assurances. It's very well saying you need to seek assurances, but how do we do that? What do we do? You know, do we ask that they delay their decision till they talk to us, or do we send some questions, or we talk them to a meeting, or whatever we do? Because we do need some assurances. You know, we're here as a committee to look at Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin on behalf of our constituents.
Yeah.
They are struggling to understand what's going on, and some of them are quite dismayed, to be honest, from the emails that both chairs are receiving. And we're also unable to give them an answer because we don't know the ins and outs of it. So we need a method now to decide how we get those assurances and what we do about it. Thanks.
Could I bring yourself in, and then I'll come to David?
Yeah, okay. So if it'd be helpful, so recognising that within our procurement rules, we are having now announced this, believed to be the successful bidder. We're now in a period of what we call standstill, where until we understand whether other bidders wish to make representations, we cannot say anything further. We are legally prohibited from saying anything further in terms of the specifics of that contract and the contract award. There are, and that's the legislation. I think I would honestly say to you that if that were not the case, you know, this is not the way we would choose to do it. This is not the way that certainly I want to do business. It's really clear how important this service is to residents, and also how anxiety provoking any sort of change in the NHS is, never mind when you've had a part of it that really does work well. So recognising all of that, what we need to do is to have as transparent a dialogue with you as the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but also with our residents as we can have once we're permitted to do so. That said, there's a lot of misinformation flying around, some of which I can probably, within the bounds of what I'm allowed to say, and give you a bit of assurance around. So the first bit is we've heard a number of concerns that there wasn't clinical engagement, general practitioner clinical engagement in assessing the bids and awarding the contract. That's absolutely not true. There was. We had a GP from outside of Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin to come and a very experienced procurement GP to come and assess both the clinical model but also the operationalisation elements. We did that because the GP board was that represents all of our practices in STW was supportive of one particular provider, which makes them an interested party. So we had to look for independent assurance, because you're absolutely right. For me, quality has to be top of what we're looking for. So when the other thing that I can say is the envelope around what we wanted to spend is unchanged. There is no saving against it, and that envelope has expanded quite considerably in the last few years following COVID and various other things. So there is no saving to be made there. The next bit is around how we weighted what we're looking for from our bidders. It was weighted 60% in terms of delivery and 40% in terms of value. Within that value, however, was also 10% social value. So what will the provider bring to this area? What will our communities get from the way that this service is provided, thinking in terms of our responsibilities as anchor institutions, employing local people, supporting the local community and all that that brings. So the idea that this was a cost-saving exercise absolutely is incorrect. This has such an impact on our residents, on our in-hours general practice, and on virtual ward, on staff, on our other providers, that we cannot get this wrong. This is not the place where we're looking for pounds down the back. It's not. This is where we're looking for quality, partnership, high delivery of care, and an ability to work with partners in that system. I think those are the, knowing that the incumbent provider has been part of the system for a really long time, and have been, certainly since I've joined the system, have been good system partners to us. I think we all recognise this was going to be a difficult thing to do. But prioritising quality and also going out to make sure that we are getting at least the same, but also, if possible, better, is the right thing to do. But the procurement regulations required us to do that. There was no option to further extend the contract. There was no legal option to directly award. We had to go to procurement. That's what we've done. I am confident that we have run a clean and independent, unbiased process. It ended in a place where I think everybody's worried, everybody's nervous, and that's exactly right. So what we've got to do with you now is work really closely with you, have that transparent relationship, have those conversations as we get into that mobilisation phase, because none of us can be nervous. We have to have all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, so that we know that you are confident, you've asked all the questions that you need to ask, we've given you all the answers that you need to hear, and we've proved them, to speak to the point about evidence, and that the provider has been able to evidence that as well. There's the other one that I've heard floating around, and I'm sure you'll all have other concerns that have been raised with you, but is about change in location or reduction in the number of locations. We very clearly specified that there needs to be a minimum of the existing bases, a minimum. So in terms of, are we going to lose coverage in rural areas? Are we going to be centralised? Absolutely no, we are not. So I'll stop there because I'm sure you're all dying to ask me things that I may or may not be allowed to answer. I'll just sort of caveat it above that. But
before I bring David in, can you give me an idea of when it is you would be able to have that conversation with this committee?
Yeah, so if we don't receive any representations from providers, then it would ordinarily be a 9-day standstill period, which I think takes us until Valentine's Day, 14th of Feb, so the end of this week.
So potentially we could invite you to our meeting on the 24th.
Potentially. If we have representations from providers, then we're obliged to go through a process to hear those. I think it's likely we will at least receive some representation from the incumbent, if I'm honest. And so it will then be about what those are and how we resolve them. But we can absolutely keep you in the loop about what that date is and how that's progressing.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think most people in the room have seen my document about the situation, and I think that one of the weaknesses in what's being proposed is the preferred provider a small and medium medium-sized enterprise. There is documentary proof from their own annual reports that they are not. They belong. It's really awkward. It took me all. I've been on holiday for a week and I've been tracking down most of the time the ownership chain, and the company that has put the winning bid does seem, as far as I can see, I'm not a forensic accountant, but as far as I can see, is in fact not a small and medium-sized enterprise. And as such, it shouldn't have been chosen, because that was the basis on which things went out to. I understand that anybody that put a bid in had to make it clear and tick a box saying they were a small and medium-sized enterprise. As I've already said, the company that I've verbalised, they are not. And on that basis alone, I think that there is a flawed process. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's something that we can pick up when you're in a position to come back to the.
Sorry, Chair, we can't. One of the problems is, unless the 14th is the deal day, if nobody, the only people that can object are those that put a bid in. We can't object. So on the 14th, if nobody objects, the deal goes through. That's it, signed, sealed and delivered. We've heard from Walner that if somebody does object, that the process will extend. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you know how long that process will extend?
It's really difficult to say. It depends upon the nature of the representations and the process that we need to go through. It could be that that it can be resolved very quickly, as in a matter of days. It may be that it will take weeks and possibly months if we have to go up through an NHS England challenge for a panel, for example. So yeah, it is difficult. I have to say, yeah, I would be very surprised if we don't receive representation.
Good. So in terms of timetable for us, I'm not sure when our next formal meeting is, but as Derek said, it's something we really do need to get on and deal with and make some sort of view known to the public, to the ICB and to the town and parish councils. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Simon Fogel, Chief Exec, Healthwatch, Telford and Wrekin. One question, if I may, to Lorna first, and then another statement, if I may. Quality versus price, 60-40, with 10% of that being social value. Was that a nationally mandated ratio or one that was chosen locally?
I'm not entirely sure, but I do believe it was one that was chosen locally, but I will go away and check that out for you.
I think that would be an important point for ourselves to consider, because I, as an organisation which is a not-for-profit but nevertheless trades to look for additional commercial work, that is always fodder for me, because you know that the actual winning bid is going to be more weighted towards what you can shave off the top line as opposed to what you can also demonstrate with quality. Second point, this makes and takes me back to when I read about the ongoing stories to do with Nottingham's maternity. And you might say, Nottingham maternity, it really is too hot in this room. He has gone off his trolley finally. The point in question is that many parents there still keep talking and saying, all that's happened and all that's been acknowledged and the deaths and traumas that the families have been through with their babies, not one single person has yet been held to account. So if this isn't done right, nobody actually takes responsibility or is adjudged responsible for those decisions. I think that's something else that should factor very heavily in exercises like this, where it is people's health at stake. Thank you.
Can I say, with your permission, as a committee, we're here representing Telford and Wrekin and Shropshire. A lot of people our voices are heard by them, but they don't seem to be heard by you. So we'd like to say, halt this decision-making process, take some note of our requests and our needs, and give us time to formulate some answers and some questions for you to answer. And I just want to move on slightly, but you did say that as far as you're concerned, Shropshire was delivered a very good service. There's no cost saving. So I just don't understand the advantages of doing it, because you're not sure if the new provider is going to provide an equally as good service, if not better, as you say, with less money. So if you're not sure, then I can't see why we decide to change. It's the old adage, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So that's all I want to say. I just think, please listen to us. We're not just 14 people or whatever around this table. We're a few thousand people.
Sorry, I'll allow you to reply, but I'm going to let Heather come in for a very quick one, and I'll have to take Tom. That's got to be the last point because we are over time on this meeting.
That's my fault.
So I don't think I said I don't know about the quality. I said I can't tell you anything further about that. There is no way that we would not have done a rigorous assessment around quality before awarding the contract. So there is a lot that sits behind the scenes that we will be able to share with you, but at present we can't, which is not the way we would choose to do business, but is the way it is. I'm absolutely hearing from you all the importance of this to you and to your constituents, and we do need to listen to that. That said, we also need to be fair to the providers that have bid and are in a process that is legally determined and has legal timelines around that. And it would be unfair of us to deviate from that at the point we are in the process. So please be assured, it's not that we're not listening. We absolutely hear the concern. We absolutely need to work with you on this openly going forward. Genuinely, we do. But it wouldn't be fair to the bidders for us to pause or to deviate at this stage. Having said that, we're giving them the opportunity to make those representations and to therefore introduce that period. And obviously, we will be listening and hearing all the views. My inbox is full of them. Everybody's inbox, my phone is ringing. It's off at the moment, thankfully. But we are hearing it. It is being fed back to us. We cannot be deaf to that. What we cannot do is allow that to influence us unfairly. There were 11 bidders who initially expressed an interest. There were 6 who were scored. Recognising that the incumbent has done a good job and is well loved, it would still be unfair to the other 4 who were not successful for us to not follow the process. So we'll hear those representations. We will share with you all that we can as soon as we can. But we are listening, honestly, simply because it can't deviate us from the process. We are listening. We hear the concern, and we will take you with us on the journey.
But it'll be too late.
We can't predetermine it.
I understand the system, and I understand that you can't comment around that. What I will say is, I don't know what you would do if somebody withdrew. And the noise around this could cause that. There are issues around that. But what I would also say is that the people of Shropshire, when they know a system works for them, have grave suspicions about something else because of the geography and because people don't understand rural Shropshire. And we've seen that with the ambulance service, we've seen it with the police, we've seen it with a whole range of people who decide actually they're going to deliver services differently for us, and it doesn't end up working well. So while you're in your listening mode, it is
useful for you to know that as soon as this goes wrong, if it goes the wrong way and it doesn't work on the ground, as these things often don't straight away with a new system or a new provider, then that will land on the ICB. And I'm not threatening you, I'm just telling you the way Shropshire is.
And we expect that. And to be honest, I'd encourage it. We have got to hear if this isn't going well, if there are things that we can do to change it, if there is a problem, and with whoever it may be, the incumbent or somebody else, absolutely, we want to hear it from you and we want to work with you to make it better.
So if this company, the other company that everybody is suggesting shouldn't get the and I know you can't comment, did withdraw, what do you then do? Because you've got 4 others in the system that were then discounted.
I don't genuinely know the answer to that. There will be a set of rules that sit with our procurement team around what would happen next. We can certainly find that out. I'm hoping that we won't get to that stage.
Yeah, re-procure. You'll have to go out and re-procure. That's what they were all talking about.
Yeah.
Just 2 things really. I'm perplexed about the whole thing. It came out of nowhere as far as I was concerned. But I think, I don't know if it's true of the rest of the committee. Were the ICB aware that this was likely? Were Shropdoc aware that this was likely? Is this the end of their term and therefore there's got to be sort of a big review and they can be part of a bidding process themselves? And did you not think that it probably would be helpful? I'm not saying that we haven't got that sort of power, but to just give time to discuss it with such a scrutiny committee as this before that decision was made by the board.
So that's a really, really good point in terms of discussion with overview and scrutiny committee, and we definitely need to get into the habit of coming back here to tell you what's happening rather than being asked to come and kind of present things that are of concern to you. If they're of concern to me, I think I would like to be able to come and talk to you about them and to work those through. In terms of how did we get to this point? Yes, the contract in its totality did come to an end in June 2024. We then had to look at, we did have to take a little bit of a risk and extend it to allow us to do full procurement. And so we did do that, but we are now where we are because we had no further ability to extend and we had to go through the full re-procurement process.
Okay, and so Shropdoc are totally aware of that.
Absolutely, they've always been aware of the data term of the contract, and we've been completely open with them all the way through.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised they haven't raised concerns with us.
Right, if I can just bring Simon in, and this is the final point, I'll be closing the meeting after this.
I'll be very, very quick. In all the tender exercises I take part in, there's always a little caveat that the tender can be withdrawn at any time and that the procurer will not be liable for any costs associated with it. I would hope the ICB on hearing that the company concerned may have misrepresented themselves, and the feedback from committees such as this may take stock and make the right decision.
Okay, so thanks very much everyone for attending. We would normally at this stage go into the date of the next meeting, but unfortunately because of the election period that's coming up within Shropshire, we haven't got a date for that at the moment. All I can say is it will be sometime in June. So thanks everyone for attending, and I shall see you next time.